It is what we do here at the Voice of College Football each and every weekday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Appreciate you stopping by. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. And we've got two excellent guests on board for today's The College Football Show. My name is Mark, and again, it's every day, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, we take your calls tonight with Leanne Herring on the On the Move show. So that's our transfer portal and recruiting update live show. That's at 8:30 tonight Eastern Time. Leanne Herring and myself with recruiting news, intel, insight, and your calls. We're going to talk some Penn State football right now. And before we do, we remind you that the Amazon links in the description section of all the videos, including this one. So when you shop on Amazon, don't send them your $50, your $100, your $500, whatever your send 5% our way. How does that work? Yes, just use the Amazon link. Same shopping experience, does not cost you a penny. It's the one way that you can contribute here to the Voice of College Football financially without spending a penny. And now we're going to talk some Penn State football. We got Marty Leap, of course, on the line here from Penn State Rivals. Marty, what's going on today?
Oh, not too much, Mark. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. I know that that you coach football, your sons play football. I know that there's somewhat of a controversy in the state of Ohio about spring football. Do they play spring football in Pennsylvania?
They don't play spring football. Some of the schools, and usually there's a correlation between, the schools that do this and being successful, the ones who aren't, will do OTAs. My oldest, for reference, they had OTAs last week and currently wrapping them up this week. Because they're the last 2 weeks of school. So, you'll see some schools who would do that, but they don't have like full-fledged spring football games or scrimmages like you see in some other states. But like I said, a lot of programs around Pennsylvania, especially the ones who are successful, do OTAs and things of that nature in spring to just kind of get the team together, get them working on things, playbook, passing trees, that sort of stuff before they really kick it into gear over the summer.
If you have any particular comments or questions for Marty, Super Chat's available right there in the chat. Otherwise, I got a list of questions, so don't worry, everyone. But if you got one, certainly we'll take it. So I see that Penn State just got an offensive line commit from Michigan for 2026. That makes 18 hard commits. Your thoughts about him in particular and anything else that's going on with, of course, that first week of June being that huge first official visits weekend?
Yeah, we'll start with the player you mentioned. I apologize now if I butchered the last name, but Benjamin, I believe it's Izuka, Eziuka. He's a kid who's a consensus 3-star, but he camped to Penn State last summer, earned the initial offer, really wanted to commit to Penn State. The coaching staff basically gave him a list. Hey, here's what you need to work on if they commit here. He worked on it, improved, camped again this past weekend, absolutely killed it. Just was incredibly impressive at camp. And now is a part of the class. So I think it's always pretty telling when you have kids who camp to earn that offer, especially that committable offer, because the staff's already seen them in action, in person, running through certain drills, running through things they know are going to translate to what they want. And B, when a kid really wants to be at a school, and, a lot of kids in recruiting, if a coaching staff tells you, hey, we're not ready to take your commitment yet, we want to see you work on X, Y, and Z, then come talk to us, they'll just move on to the next school. And he didn't. He went and worked on X, Y, and Z, and now is part of their class. So I think that's always very telling. Again, when a kid does what he needs to do, is presented in by coaching staff, that speaks volumes to their work ethic, obviously, as well as their desire to be at that school. And again, I think it's very beneficial to get kids into a camp setting, get them to work out for you in person, and then you make that offer, take that commitment, because you really know what you're getting at that point. You mentioned the class as a whole, like you said, currently 18 commits, arrivals. We have it as the fifth best class in the country right now. Another busy official visit weekend coming up, and they have a lot of irons in the fire yet. They've already hosted probably their 2 remaining targets on the board for this cycle. Joey O'Brien, a safety from LaSalle College High School in Philadelphia, same high school as Abdul Carter, as well as Corey Adams, a cornerback from Maryland, both borderline 5-star players. They both have a couple official visits left to take, but right now Penn State appears to be the leader for both of them. 2 big fish on the board. They're going to want to take another running back. Messiah Mickens is the only running back in this class right now. Now, he's a good back. He's the second highest rated player in the class from Harrisburg. We did like another running back. Defensive line, you're always working. Huge weekend coming up on the defensive line. Luke Wafel, who, again, borderline 5-star guy, the younger brother of Penn State defensive lineman Owen Wafel will be in town Carter Meadows, who some places have as a top 5 recruit in the country. Another defensive lineman can be in town for a visit, as well as Tyson Hurley, a high school teammate of Meadows. And they both go to Gonzaga, which is a school, with Olu Fashion as an example, has been really good at Penn State over the years. So it'll be a big weekend for Deion Barnes and the defensive line staff this weekend. But yeah, the class is coming along really nice. Like I said, Rivals, we currently have it ranked 5th nationally. I think all 3 of the big recruiting sites have it in the top 10. Couple big fish still out there. I mentioned a few by name. Probably going to look to add another offensive lineman. Marlon Bright is a guy who officially visited this past weekend. He's going to commit July 5th. There's some belief, maybe he may already be a silent commit and he just wants to stick to that July 5th plan. And then he gets like a family barbecue or something he's wanting to commit at. So, they're going to want another offensive lineman, but he could be it, another running back. You never take too many guys in the trenches. And this is really shaping up to be one of the better classes James Franklin has had. And it's kind of funny because in Penn State, the joke has been the 4-year cycles for Franklin. 2018 was at the time the highest rated class he ever signed. That was Micah Parsons highlighted that one. 2022, then depending on who you ask, maybe surpass that. I said I always lean 22 slightly because of Drew Aller being in it over Will Levis in the 2018 class. In that 2022 class, Drew Aller, Abdul Carter, Katron Allen, Denai Dennis Sutton, Nick Singleton. That's going to probably go down as one of the best recruiting classes in school history. And now here we are talking the 2026 class where, again, they're in that position to maybe sign top 5 class. So something about every 4 years, I guess, these recruiting classes. But I think it also helps when, you were one play away from going to the national championship game last year, and you're getting a lot of preseason, maybe number 1 buzz. That doesn't hurt on the recruiting trail either. So, yeah, a couple big official visit recruiting weekends left before the dead period in July. But, the staff, as they always do, are killing it on the recruiting trail. There are a few staffs who, in terms of their ability to just recruit and work with families, do it better than Penn State.
Marty, is there anybody out there that may not necessarily be a 4 or 5 star, just somebody that you really like that you hope Penn State gets, might be flying under the radar, that based on, I know you're a recruiting guy and you coach football, so maybe somebody that stood out to you that may not get the ranking that they have earned at this point?
Yeah, I'll go with 2 guys I mentioned. I'll start with Bright. We have him as a 3-star Rivals. Some place have him as 3 stars, some have him as a 4-star, but he's a guy who's not garnering a lot of attention, but I like him a lot on the offensive line. I think that, first off, with what Phil Troutwine has done with this offensive line, I tell people all the time, if you don't have the full trust in Phil Troutwine, I don't know what to tell you at this point. I mean, the guy's turned down NFL jobs. He turned down Alabama. I mean, other places want him. He's very good. But Bright, he's 6'6" already, 270 pounds. He has that reach. He has that length for tackle. That is so important. And that's the kind of stuff you can't teach, right? You got it or you don't. And he has it at tackle. I really like him. And I also mentioned Tyson Harley in passing. I think somewhat he gets overlooked, being a teammate of Carter Meadows, who, again, in some places he's a top 5 recruit in the country. But Harley, again, 6'4", pretty explosive off the edge. Plays at Gonzaga College in Washington, D.C., and anyone who knows East Coast football, Gonzaga plays as tough a schedule as anybody. So to do it against competition, he's done it again. He's another guy I like a lot. So those are 2 guys who I think are more the underrated aspects, 3 stars in some places that I think are, very high on Penn State's board, probably higher than some people may realize, that I think the staff would be very happy to land.
Okay, Marty, let's turn our attention to the just newly announced kickoff times for the first 3 weeks of the season. So the Big Ten has made those announcements, and across college football, CBS, Big Ten Network, FS1 included. I'm on record as attacking the football program to a certain extent, or more so the AD, about the lightweight schedule. But Penn State is not alone in the Big Ten. Maryland, Indiana, there's a few others out there. So Rutgers, typically a culprit. But when we look at the first 3 games, we got Nevada, 3:30 Eastern, CBS. Then we've got an FIU game at noon on the Big Ten Network. Then we've got Villanova on FS1 at 3:30 Eastern. Anything about those 3 games that stand out in regards to just game times, placements, anything that works in Penn State's advantage or disadvantage?
I think if you're the coaching staff, you're probably happy that 2 of those are 3:30 games just solely from recruiting. It's a lot easier to get kids, especially during high school football season where they're playing on Friday nights, to a 3:30 kickoff in the noon. So I think you're very happy to have Nevada and FIU be 3:30 kicks. But of the game times that have been announced, there's no way around it. The one that is the biggest, eyebrow raiser is the fact that Oregon is going to be 7:30 under the lights on NBC. It's gonna be the first time they've had a whiteout with a no knock to any of these teams they've played in recent years with a whiteout worthy opponent since Auburn in 2021. And probably the most hyped up whiteout since Ohio State in 2018. So I think that's the biggest thing if you're Penn State staff is to get Oregon where you can make that a true traditional whiteout, 7:30 under the lights. First career road start for Dante Moore. I mean, there's been quarterbacks who've had a ton of starting experience who step into the whiteout and struggle immensely. So I think if you're Penn State, like I said, those first three, you are very happy. 2 of them are 3:30 kicks, just solely for getting recruits to the game. But the most important thing is you are thrilled that NBC got that Oregon game and not Fox, so that it is going to be 7:30. It's going to be under the lights. It's going to be a whiteout, and it's going to be a raucous atmosphere. It's one of the best atmospheres at Beaver Stadium in quite a few years.
Despite the disappointments that a lot of people on the national scale would point at concerning James Franklin's tenure at Penn State, obviously there are Big Ten championships involved and trips to the Rose Bowl and BCS bowl games, New Year's Six bowl games lined up consecutively for a number of years. And then a playoff appearance that included 2 wins this last year and, a field goal away from the national championship game. What I'm leading into is, of course, we just passed Memorial Day and a number of the big magazines have hit the stands, Lindy's, Athlon's. I've not looked at them, but I've heard secondhand that Penn State's in the top 3 or 4, as you might expect. Do you remember as much of an anticipation for a season as this, when almost everyone's anticipated heavily there? But this one, wow, they're really in rarefied air.
Yeah, we were just talking about this recently. A couple of friends of mine and I were, and a couple of colleagues, and we all agreed you probably have to go back to 1999 when they were preseason number 1. I mean, that 2017 team, after they'd won the Big Ten in 2016, had a lot of hype around it. But you were only 2 or 3 years removed from the sanctions. People knew in the trenches that team was not where it needed to be yet, and that showed up in that Ohio State game that year. In that team, that team was very good. Saquon Barkley, Trace McSorley, Chris Godwin, Mike Gesicki. That offense was explosive. It was fun. It could score on anybody. But you kind of knew that defensively there were some holes there, and you had the holes in the trenches, and you knew that maybe you weren't truly a national title contender, and there was no one who was legitimately putting that as maybe the number 1 team in the country preseason. It hasn't been this way again since 99 when they were the preseason number 1, when you had LeVar Arrington coming off the end on one end of the defensive line and Courtney Brown on the other, and they went 1-2 in the draft that year. And, if not for just an incredible string of unlucky plays at the very end of that Minnesota game that caused that season to come unglued, they probably won a national championship that year. Yeah, it's been since 99. I think that a team has had this much hype compared with realistic expectations going into the year. Because there's been some years since, like I said, I mentioned 2017, some of those mid to late 2000 years towards the end of the Paterno era where they'd win 10, 11 games, win a Rose Bowl, whatever it may be, where there was a lot of excitement, but you never thought they truly could win a national title. I think this year, I'm not going to say it's national championship or bust, because I think there's very few times ever a program should view a season that way. But man, you feel if you can't do it this year with everything you have coming back, paired with what Ohio State loses, paired with what your schedule is, and even just looking around college football in general, you have a hard time finding a team that you truly believe is head and shoulders better than this team, top to bottom on the roster. There's a lot of expectation and a lot of excitement around this team. And like I said, it's probably been since before the turn of the century that there was this combination of excitement with, again, like legitimate national championship hope and expectations like they have now.
There's not a quarterback in the Big Ten who has achieved as much as Drew Aller. At the same time, there is not a quarterback probably in the Big Ten that everyone's expecting to, meaning he's proven the most, but he also has the most to prove just because of the enormous expectations.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you said, he's definitely proven the most of any quarterback in the Big Ten. But I also, like you said, having a lot to prove, I think there might be still more untapped potential with him than maybe any quarterback. And, maybe put Bryce Underwood kind of on a different pedestal because everyone knows the expectations with him, but as a true freshman, you're not going to expect to see that this year. There may not be a quarterback in the Big Ten with more untapped potential yet either. So yeah, it's a big season for Drew, obviously. And, it's kind of a cop out to say it with any team, but they're going to go as far as he goes, right? Look at last year. Fiesta Bowl plays great against Boise State, and they roll against Notre Dame, the Orange Bowl. He had one of the worst games of his career, and in the end, that interception at the end was the biggest play of the game of the season. Like that interception cost them a trip to the national title. So it's they're going to go as far as Drew will take them. Now, I will say this year, I think this, I got to say too, this might be record for the last 2 years of furthest we've been into a show without mentioning wide receivers. But I think this year with the improved wide receiver room, that'll help a lot too. But yeah, they're going to go as far as Drew takes them. But like you said, he's got the most experience of any quarterback in the Big Ten. It probably has the highest ceiling, the most untapped potential yet. And I mean, heck, there's few quarterbacks in the country who have the tools Drew has. If Drew comes out and puts it together and has that breakout season that people are waiting on, there's a good shot he goes 1-1 in April. And at worst, probably the number 2 quarterback after Arch. So, you don't get quarterbacks like that very often. And I think, again, that's kind of where some of the differences between this team and the 2017 team I mentioned earlier. As great of a college quarterback as Trace McSorley was, he wasn't a guy where it was a lot of like backyard football. He's just going to run around, make plays. If he needed to grip it and rip it 30, 40 yards down the field, he didn't have that, and Drew does. So, I think it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be exciting to see because as far as they go is going to hinge on that right arm of Drew Aller. As good as his offensive line is, as good as his running game should be, we've seen it the last couple of years in the big games. When he's been successful, they've won. When he hasn't, they've lost. And it's probably going to be the same way this year.
Marty, I hate to take you back there, but you did it to yourself. So I don't think I asked you this. ABC Sports once said it: the thrill of agony and the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. You are so invested for an entire year, and you're a guy that's both fan, writer, covers the team, lives this stuff every day. And so you get to that moment. You've been waiting all year to get to that moment. And then obviously you're in a tie game. James Franklin gives him the keys and he throws it away. Just, I don't know that that's able to be described.
Yeah. And in the immediate aftermath, all the talk around here, sports radio, all of that was, should they've just played for overtime? And I think the general consensus was, had it gone to overtime, they would have won because they were the team that was dominating in the trenches. And in college football overtime, especially, usually if you can control the trenches, you're going to be the team that puts it away. But to me, I don't like that mindset. I was, hey, go win it. Put faith in your quarterback, right? Put faith in your quarterback. Go try and win the games. What they tried to do, it didn't work. I mean, it wasn't a good decision by Drew. But anyone, you can go back and watch that play. It was like the DB ran the route. I don't know what Amari Evans was doing. There's a reason Amari Evans is no longer with the program, and he's going to be at Washington this year instead. But yeah, it was agonizing. I mean, there's a lot of people who have followed Penn State their entire life, me included, who came out of that like that was maybe the most agonizing loss you've ever experienced, not just as a Penn State fan, as a sports fan in general. For me as a fan of Penn State football and the Minnesota Vikings, that was right up there with the 2009 NFC Championship game when Favre threw it away at the end. When you felt like you were the better team, you controlled the entire game, and you should have been the team in the Super Bowl. You should have been the team in the national championship, and your quarterback, being a gunslinger, just kind of threw it away at the end. So, yeah, it was gut-wrenching. It was agonizing. I remember after that game, like I couldn't bring myself to like watch anything college football related for like 48 hours. I just needed to kind of decompress and unplug for a while. And I mean, again, that's part of fanhood, right? People often like to remind everyone, fan is short for fanatic for a reason. So, but yeah, but at the same time, you look back on it, and I do think too, just knowing the personality of Drew Aller, the way he's been this offseason, you better believe the way that game ended has lit one hell of a fire under him, in his belly, in the belly of that wide receiver room, for the guys who were there for that game and are still back. Even your newcomers, your Kyron Hudson's, Devontae Ross, Trebor Pena. I think they're like, hey, you know what? This team views themselves as being a wide receiver away from a national championship. They think we're the guys that can get them there. So, that pushes them as well. So that's always part of the other side of that flip side of the agony of defeat is, how do you respond to that? And I think all accounts are this team has responded extremely well, Drew included. I mean, just look at how many guys came back, right? It reminds you a lot of that Michigan team from a few years ago, from Ohio State last year, where they could have ridden off in the sunset, but they're like, no, this is not how we want this to end. This is not what we want our legacy to be. We're coming back for that one last run. So yeah, it was agonizing. It was, again, like I said, there was a sports fan. It was up there with that 09 NFC Championship game for the most painful one I've ever had to sit through. And there was a lot of commonalities between these two games as well. But yeah, I think that the team has taken it and they have turned it into a positive, at least the most positive you can. It has been a major motivating factor throughout the offseason for them.
Yeah. And a decade earlier, there was 1998, but I don't need to go there. I don't know if you were around for that one.
No, I remember it just enough because that was like the first. So not to go off on a side story, how I became a Vikings fan, that was like the first year I was old enough to watch football and understand it. I'm like, oh man, this Randy Moss is pretty cool. I'm going to like this team. And then the Gary Anderson kick happened. I always joke with people, I should have known right then and there I should have switched teams immediately, but it was just a precursor of things to come for the rest of my life, I suppose.
As you know, it started a long time before that. I could talk NFL history forever, but the Vikings have been a cursed bunch for a long, long time. All right, Marty, we appreciate you being here. Penn State Rivals is the place to join Marty, and you see his Twitter/X handle right there for all of his work. Marty, always appreciate the time, sir.
Absolutely, Mark. Season gets closer. I'm sure we'll be talking more.
Absolutely. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. It must be Championship Wednesday here on our show because we're going to keep this rolling with the Big Ten Championship participant and winner, of course. That sometimes gets forgotten because somebody else won the national championship, but that's the way college football works now. It's kind of like the NFL. We got Eric Scopel here from Duck Territory to break down some Oregon football for us. Eric, it's been a while. How are you?
Good. I wish you hadn't gone Vikings 98 on me though. That's my team as well. And I had my first bout of insomnia at about 9 years old because of that game. Because Gary just didn't miss, and then Gary missed.
He did not. Like 30 for 30, something in that range.
Yeah, hadn't missed all year, and then of course he missed the one he needed to.
Yeah. NFL history. I love NFL history, but I feel for you there. I was actually a Vikings fan when I was like 8 years old. When I first became a football fan, they just captivated me for like 2 years, and then I switched to someone else. But for like 2 years, jerseys and jackets and the whole deal. All right, a few generations before you probably, but a ways before. Yeah. All right, Eric, Oregon football. So we're in the, that June camp mode, official visits. I see that the number one linebacker in the country, Tyler Atkinson, is just coming off a Clemson visit last weekend, but he's certainly a guy that's got an official visit that Dan Lanning would love to reel in.
Yeah, this first weekend here is the list keeps growing, and every time I look up, it's another 5-star. I think there are 4 5-stars on the list I have right now. That number might change, but yeah, this upcoming week it kicks off official visit season, and the Ducks are kind of in a weird spot. I don't know, like I haven't been on here, Mark, and I'm not sure how much you've talked Oregon recruiting this year, but it's been like the most wild roller coaster of they were the number one class in the country, like mid-February, and then they've had 5 decommitments, haven't really added anybody else, and they've fallen to like mid-20s, like outside the top 25. So like I think ultimately like Atkinson, Brandon Arrington, Reiner Lyons, some of these names that are going to be here this weekend or the one after, like there's like a little bit of pressure to close. I mean, just because it's unusual for Oregon to be, especially under Dan Lanning, to be in the spot where they're like in the mid-20s as opposed to the top 5, top 10. And I mentioned it, you mentioned a name. There's a ton of big-time prospects who will be here. I think there's a sense of like they need to get some work done. They need to have some success. This can't be a June where it's like, hey, we hosted all these guys and finished second for all of them. It's got to be a month of, hey, we actually pulled in and landed those guys, and then let's hold those commitments to December. So I know our message board over on Duck Territory has been talking an awful lot about it.
And to your point, Eric, there is the actual situation of how good the recruiting is and what those relationships have been and what they've been able to do. And then there's the optics of it. And what I'm pointing to is the jump in the pool with Richard Wesley from a few weeks ago. And so when you add the optics to it, because 9 out of 10 college football fans, even strong college football fans, will miss the decommits and the flips from time to time. But when something like that goes viral, then it's like this becomes this budding joke. and it becomes the latest version of Brian Kelly doing a dance with a kid who then decommitted, whatever it was, a couple weeks later. So that's obviously what people remember.
Well, the funny part is Richard Wesley will be on campus this weekend as well. So maybe he puts the hat back on. I mean, that's been a weird recruitment. I think that was like a premature commitment. I think he decided, hey, I want to go to Oregon, and probably, I hate to say it and go into this because Oregon has obviously been super benefited from NIL, but this is probably one where he goes back and tells mom and dad, yeah, I really want to go to Oregon. I've committed. And they're going okay. And then he talks to his recruiting team, and it's a matter of, what's the NIL dollar? And then they circled the wagon and went, oh, that's not what we want the NIL dollar to be. Why don't you open up your recruitment again? That's sort of what my understanding of how this has played out has been. So maybe he ends up picking Oregon shortly after. I don't know, but that one was really weird. All the decommitments have had kind of these weird little twists of oh, okay, so this guy they brought in was a big time defensive line recruit. Now he wants to play offensive line. Okay. I guess that's fine. Oregon didn't really want him to play offensive line. You'll let him go somewhere else. But this is a crucial month. They need some success for sure.
So, I counted 4 or 5 stars coming in this weekend.
Yeah.
So we could talk about all sorts of different guys, but when you match what you believe the ability levels of these guys are versus kind of what the optics are and what the recruiting battles are with other schools, when you throw everything together, are there a certain number of guys that you feel, okay, these are even a cut above in regards to not just their talent, but the situation, and that they're so close with these particular players that to get the lean and to get the final commitment, they're really the linchpins of this class?
It always starts at quarterback, and Oregon was in seemingly a good spot with Jared Curtis. He ends up obviously going to Georgia, and that makes a lot of sense. Hard to get a kid out of Tennessee to come all the way across the country when they have options to go elsewhere. So what's next? And Ryder Lyons is another 5-star. He's going to take a mission. So he's kind of more a 27 recruit as opposed to a 26 prospect. But I feel that recruitment is really important for this class. You and I both know, following this for a while, the importance of quarterbacks in shaping these classes. You'd have to. I would be surprised how many, if there have been very many top 5 classes in the last decade that didn't have a blue chip quarterback in it. That oftentimes is kind of the rallying call of hey, we like Oregon, or we like this school, but do they have the quarterback? And once you get that quarterback, dominoes fall. So I look at that one. And again, even though he's kind of not a 26, I know he is in terms of graduation, but he's going to take his religious mission after the year, it sounds like. I just point to that one and say, if they could get that done this month, I could see it get things moving a little bit differently. Maybe things you start getting some momentum, I guess. But, that's one. They miss out on several offensive tackles. They had Cody Green committed. He was a big time, I think, the 3rd ranked tackle in the country. He ends up decommitting and going up to Seattle, which pissed off a lot of Oregon fans because you hate losing recruits of that caliber to your rivals. So they miss out there. Emmanuel Iheanacho is a guy who's coming in this month, who I think a lot of people think Oregon's leading for. That's a 5-star. I think just getting some momentum in that offensive class is necessary. You look at what they've done, only 8 verbals across, in this total class, but 6 are defensive, and the 2 on offense. It's a running back, it's a tight end. These aren't the pillars of what you want an offensive class to be. So I look at Lyons, I look at Iheanacho. Not that these are the best of the best here. They're both big-time 5-star top 15 prospects. There would be higher-rated guys here. But these are the ones that I think you point to and go, if they could get both of those guys this month, I think the class not only makes sense to expect an uptick in the ranking, but also maybe other guys follow.
Eric Skopel here from Duck Territory. You can catch him right there on 247 Sports and the podcast. Eric, what is the name of the podcast, and typically when does that get dropped?
We do the odds and audibles, and we're kind of cutting back during the summer, so I think we're just doing a Tuesday, Friday format. And during the season, we do every single day of the week. So we're taking a little bit of a break from that much podcast content. But yeah, Tuesdays, Fridays are a good time to find us. You can find those on podcast app. You can find those on YouTube.
And you can catch Eric, obviously, right there on Twitter/X, and he's got the handle right there on the banner. And since you brought up quarterback and how important it is, of course, Dante Moore was one of those 5-stars a few years ago. So we saw a trend for about 2 or 3 years that made total sense, that this transfer portal was a new thing. And then everybody that had pressure on them, meaning all the elite programs and even a notch below that, were like, we're not going to trust our quarterback room, even though they're all highly recruited.
Yeah.
We're going to run and we're going to grab a transfer quarterback. And for about, again, 2 or 3 years, you'd see 15 to 20 accomplished quarterbacks gone. This year, though, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, they come to mind. There's some other schools out there are saying basically Texas going with an Notre Dame for the first time, not going to get a Sam Hartman or a Riley Leonard, saying, okay, the guy that we recruited, we're going to stay with. Now, I know that Oregon didn't recruit Dante Moore, or shouldn't say they didn't recruit him. They certainly were.
They recruited him.
They definitely recruited him. They didn't originally sign him, but he's an inexperienced quarterback, and they're saying, no, we're staying with this guy, and we're going to go with him.
Yeah, no, that's, and we'll touch on quarterback, but just the through line for the offseason has been Coach Lanning is betting on the recruiting. Like I think they signed 11 portal players. You know, one was a punter. So you can kind of like, they went out and basically were like, we're going to be filling some holes, but we really want the base of this team to be guys that have been here for a couple of years. And quarterback's a position where I think, you know, back to your point, I think the number of high-end options were pretty limited out there to begin with for whatever reason this cycle. But Oregon, I think, made it pretty clear early. Like they were sticking with Dante Moore or Austin Novosad. Like one of those two guys is their guy. Most people think it'll be Dante Moore. But that's certainly a bet that is different than what they've done the previous years. Like when Dan Lanning got here, he inherited a roster that had a Ty Thompson on it, who was at that time like the best quarterback recruit in program history. We've kind of seen that career go south. He ends up at Tulane. I think he's playing tight end now or something. He's not playing quarterback. So obviously that worked out, but they ended up adding Bo Nix that cycle. And then a couple of years later, it was, hey, is Ty Thompson going to get his chance? And it was like, no, they're going to bring in Dylan Gabriel and Ty's going to go off and hang out at Tulane and whatnot. So, you know, the commitment to the transfer quarterback that's been in place the last couple of years has kind of shaped this program in terms of like, they've had really experienced veteran quarterbacks that have both gone on and been drafted, both been Heisman Trophy finalists. But at the same time, like when you recruit high-end guys, you at some point have to be like, hey, we're going to actually give you a chance to play and be like the starter. And I think they would have been a real tactical error, even if they could have upgraded. And I'm not convinced they could have this year, to be like, hey, Dante and Austin, you guys have been here a year or two. We're going to shift and go find somebody who's better, wait it out. I just think that's not a good way of doing business long-term. And I think you do feel like, just having watched the Oregon spring game, that both Dante and Austin could lead this team to 9, 10, 11 wins in the regular season. Like, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. So we'll see what happens there. Like that's the big question, is you have to have an elite quarterback to do much of anything in the postseason. And Oregon has had elite quarterback play the last 3 years, and they've made some noise. Now the question is, can they do that without an experienced guy? Where does Dante get them? Most people expect it will be him. The staff hasn't named anything. That's kind of par for the course with Dan Lanning. Doesn't play true freshman, and he doesn't announce starters until like the game one or so. I expect that'll be the operation, and you know how it operates this year. But what do they have there is a really big question mark, and it kind of is the overarching theme of this whole team this season. Is like, okay, you guys were heavy transfer in the last couple of years. Now you've kind of said we're going to rely on these young guys. How does that play out?
Any Oregon fan, Eric, that heard you say 9, 10, 11 win, you know, Oregon's reached a place in college football. Like, you know, we could name the places, Georgia, Ohio State, where it's like, you know, we can't even think about not contending for a national championship. And of course, 9 and 10 seems to be the divider there. Can't get 9 wins. It's got to be 10. If they get to 10, they should be fine.
Yeah, no, it is. We have reached that point. And like, I think that's a healthy place for the Oregon program to be, the way they've committed to this. I also think like they're going to have to like prove their mettle as developers, and, you know, not just having a really talented roster that you put together through the portal. Like that to me is the kind of, is really what this season is about. Is Dan Lanning has done an awesome job. I don't think anybody who covers college football questions his ability to like develop a program that can reach, you know, the highest of the highs. Like that feels very attainable. I think a lot of people expect that we'll be competing or maybe winning a national championship in the next 3 to 5 years of him being here. At the same time, like, do they have the roster to do it again? Like last year's team went 12-0 in the regular season. They relied on a lot of guys that were fifth-year seniors, fourth-year seniors, sixth-year seniors, you know, fourth-year juniors, whatever. You know, just these veteran players. That's not the bet they're making this year. They're saying we've got a bunch of young guys that we're ready to to take a shot at this with. If they're able to actually make a run at 10, 11, 12 wins, and again, that's become the expectation in Eugene. Like I haven't made my predictions yet. I think I'll predict they'll win 10, and there'll be people that are saying I'm crazy not picking 11 or 12 wins. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast right now. And this is probably the hardest season there's been to actually make a prediction like that, because there are so many unknowns. Like last year, I felt I had some conviction in predicting they'd go 12-0. They end up going 12-0. The year before, I thought they were going to win 10 games. They won 10 games, and the 2 games they lost were the games I thought they'd lose. This year is a different animal. Like I haven't made my predictions, but I think I lean 10 wins. But like if you told me at the end of the year, like quarterback play didn't work out, some of the younger players maybe weren't what we expected they would be, and they win 8 or 9 games, like I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. It would be a really disappointing outcome for a program that wants to be on the ascension, wants to be competing. So I think expectation is college football playoff or bust every year at Oregon. And this is certainly one of those years where you can point and go, like, there's so much turnover that is it unreasonable for us to think they can actually get there?
Eric, we started out the conversation alluding to the NFL. And so I'll take this from the NFL of the 1980s and the NFC in particular, because there was a procession that went through where teams were losing in the NFC Championship game. And then they were just that one step away, and then they did all the right things to get themselves to the Super Bowl. Just went for like 4 consecutive years in the NFC, the Redskins, the Niners, the Bears, etc., where they would lose in the NFC Championship game. Then they would take the next step. Now with Oregon, but we've also seen situations where a team reaches championship play and they get gut punched, and it's like, are they really that close, or is there something functionally wrong here? So Oregon loses to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but we know how they lost to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So do you think they in any way walked away from that game, the brain trust, Dan Lanning and staff, saying, maybe, we're doing a good thing here, but maybe we're not as close as we thought?
That's such a good question, Mark, and in part because I wish I could get a straight answer from Dan or anybody on staff on that sort of topic. And if you've seen any of his post-game or pre-game or midweek interviews, you've seen Dan is about as buttoned up as anybody in the country, and that's because he's from the Kirby and Nick coaching tree, and that's how those guys do business. And I'm not blaming him for it, but I'd love to have some candid answers on like what that game actually meant, because I asked Dan specifically about this on our first time talking after the Rose Bowl, and I think it was in March. And I asked him, like, hey, what's like, is this going to be something that like you carry throughout the whole year? Because the year before they hadn't talked about it publicly, but like I knew behind the scenes that loss to Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, which would have given them a spot in the college football playoff, obviously, that really like that chapped their ass. Like they were pissed about that. Like that was a big thing the whole offseason. But that was a different animal. That was like you played the same team twice. You lost both games by 3 points. Like game could have gone either way. To your point, like Ohio State wasn't competitive at all, or Oregon wasn't competitive at all with Ohio State in that game. Like there was no, like I know they won the first matchup, and that's probably the compelling argument to like, oh, actually they're pretty close to beating. I mean, they were one of 2 teams last year to beat the national champion. At the same time, the last time they played, and games count differently in October than they do in December and January. The last time they played, they got absolutely spit roasted. Like it wasn't competitive at all for any part of the game. Like what does that do? And I actually think in a weird way, they benefit from not having many players back from that team. Like I think back to some of these teams like that, like there's like a mental hurdle it creates when you have a loss like that. Like Oregon isn't dealing with the roster that they have 5 starters back and like 4 more guys other than that who were like real rotational players. Like this is a brand new football team. And for the reasons we laid out earlier with how much youth they're relying on, like I understand kind of some skepticism about what they're going to be this year. But one of the things I don't doubt is that like, this is a brand new team that's not going to be thinking about what happened in the Rose Bowl. Like the guys that are going to be key players this year didn't play in that game pretty much. Right. And so I think in a certain way, like, I don't know what the staff, I wish I had better information on this, and maybe I will over the course of the off season. I don't know what the staff's thoughts are, but I just know there's not a lot of players that are probably overly affected by that and aren't second guessing because they weren't really involved in much of anything there.
And it's really an unfortunate conclusion to a season because, again, I'll go back to the NFL. this has become an NFL model where once we're hitting January 20th, New Year's Day seems like it was like 3 years ago.
Sure does.
And when I'm having the conversation, I think Ohio State pretty much proved to be the best team in the country. You're having the conversation the next day or two. Who's the second best team in the country? People, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame. And I throw in Oregon. People laugh and make all sorts of comments like they had one bad day, and it was a really bad day. But then we saw what that team did to all these other good teams too. So they had a great season, and they might have been the second best team in the country, but they were kind of like forgotten because they're just this layered system to this playoff now.
Right. And that's where that was exactly my observation, exactly what I read. And I don't blame people for thinking that way of like, because we are creatures of the moment. And the most recent thing, and I even alluded to it, like, yeah, beating Ohio State on like October 12th, that's super impressive, but losing by, I can't even remember the final score because I blocked it. I just know it was like 35-0 or 31-0 in the first half, whatever that final score was. Like, that sort of told you a lot. And I don't blame people for feeling that way. I also go like, if you're going to compare like where Oregon was at the end of the season to where Penn State was, I'd say like if that's the comparison you're going to make, like Oregon beat that team 2.5 weeks before they lost to Ohio State. And then we watched Penn State just kick the crap out of teams that, and I don't want to get stuck on this too much, but clearly the NCAA has also acknowledged it was a mistake, the way that the seeding was, because they've gone and fixed it. If Oregon was playing Indiana or Boise State, which would have been the seeds based upon, the actual rankings and not including the bye weeks, we're having a totally different conversation. And maybe we're talking about Oregon losing to Ohio State in like the national championship game. And maybe it's the same result, but we're also going like, yeah, but they also were 15-0 going into that loss, or whatever it was, 16-0. I'm trying to think through what that number would be. Either way, there'd be a different conversation. So I know I see someone in the crowd here. Oregon is going to Oregon. Totally understand that. Oregon has no track record of actually winning these big national playoff postseason games. They have a ton of track record in the regular season, but at the same time, they really need to get over the hump here and win one of these in the biggest stages, in January. Do I think this is the year where it happens? I probably don't. And I would be probably surprised if Oregon is playing, in the second or third round of the college football playoff this year, just based upon all the younger players.
Yeah. So this is our buddy Wet Blanket. And I'm almost positive. I often forget people's fandom. So excuse me, Wet Blanket, if I screwed this up. Wet Blanket's an Oklahoma State fan. Well, that may not turn out too well the second or third week of the season. But
yeah, it might not. Because again, this is interesting because I was just doing my pre-season kind of look at the teams on Oregon's schedule. I don't have it pulled up in front of me. Maybe Wet Blanket can inform us if he's actually an Oklahoma State fan. But I think they added like 39 transfers. The Cowboys did.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I look at Oregon and I look at Oklahoma State going like, I have no idea. Like Oregon has the higher rated and regarded players, but like whatever Oklahoma State is, it's not the team that lost every game in Big 12 play last year, right? Like, is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. I just know I don't really know what they are. So maybe Wet Blanket will feel silly about that in early September. My expectation is Oregon will win that game and win it pretty soundly. It's at Autzen. Like Oregon doesn't lose there to teams that aren't like far superior, and they beat teams that are better than them sometimes. But both those teams are just like total wild cards to me right now.
Yeah, so we'll finish with that. Of course, the Big Ten announced its first 3 weeks of kickoff times and networks. We got Montana State as the opener at home, 4 p.m. Eastern, Big Ten Network. Oklahoma State, the aforementioned Cowboys there, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. Then Oregon at Northwestern. The body clocks are not going to love this. Noon Eastern. 11 is Central, 9 a.m. on the West Coast.
Yep.
That's the Fox Big Noon game. It's a desperate week that week in the Big Ten. Penn State, of course, the big one, and that's a whiteout on NBC at night. Anything jump out as being significant there?
I just can't wait for this game with Penn State. And that's one of the fun things that happens in conferences, especially new conferences like that, is you develop rivalries. Like, and it happened in the Pac-12 when Utah joined, like Oregon and Utah, for whatever reason, over the last 3 to 6 years in the Pac-12, 3 to 5 years, like those teams were meeting in November for games that meant a lot, or they're meeting in, in December, at the conference championship games for games that meant a lot. So these rivalries kind of develop that way. I think that might be what's happening with Oregon and Ohio State. And I certainly think that could be a case made that Oregon and Penn State are headed there too, just because you look around, you go like, who are the year in and year out contenders for Big Ten championship games? It's Oregon, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State. Like those to me feel like the teams. It doesn't mean an odd year, like a USC could make a run, or an Iowa, or gosh, I don't know, like Minnesota probably feels unlikely at this point with the heavy hitters they have at the top of the conference. But like, it doesn't seem unfathomable that these are the teams that matter every year. And I just think that Oregon's trip out there, I've never been. I'm excited to go. I hope I'm cleared to go. Like they put the travel for me. I've got competition with my coworkers. I think we're all battling to be there. I'm just excited to see A, what that environment looks like, B, how does that impact Oregon, and C, like what is the impact of that game for the course of the season. I know you're talking specifically about kickoff times and networks, and maybe there's an answer in there somewhere, but I guess it's June 4th, and that game is to be played like 4 or 5 months from now, and I'm already like looking at the matchups, getting excited about what that could mean and what that day could be like in Pennsylvania, and frankly, like I know from talking just anecdotally, like there's a ton of Oregon fans that are really hoping to go to this game, and just to see what it's like out there for the whiteout.
I'll remind Oregon fans that obviously there was an Idaho game last year, and Montana State has a pretty sound FCS reputation.
Yeah, Montana State, it's like sneaky there to start the season, especially with, you mentioned Idaho last year was wildly close. Like people will probably remember this nationally better than some Oregon fans will, because they kind of forget about the month of September. Like Oregon got off to a really rocky start last year. It was very fortunate to be undefeated going into, Big Ten play, and then obviously found the next gear, won out and everything. I don't think Oregon's going to lose to Montana State. I think Montana State's significantly better than Idaho. And I think with this Oregon team, at least in the month of September, will probably be significantly worse than last year's team, even though last year's team didn't set the bar very high, although they ended up getting to a really high level. So, yeah, that feels like one where you're looking at the schedule and you kind of overlook at it and go like, oh, Oklahoma State's the first big test of the season. I guess I'm not going to be like super shocked if that game ends up being a little closer than people expect, because Montana State's been, I think, in the the FCS college football playoff like semifinals the last couple of years. They were ranked, I think, first for parts. I remember looking at the schedule going, okay, so currently this is the number one team in FBS playing the number one team in FCS. That's like going to be an interesting matchup. But yeah, it'll be a really good, I guess, way to just kind of measure where this team is. And with so much youth and stuff, I think we'll come out of that going like, that was a really valuable lesson one way or the others.
Eric Scopel, Duck Territory 247 Sports. Eric, we appreciate you stopping by. As always, great conversation and great intel out of you. And it's good to see you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
All right. Talking Oregon football. So we ran through the Big Ten championship game participants, Penn State and Oregon today. How about that? A good run of guests here at the Voice of College Football. I think we've been doing a damn good job of bringing in some guests over the last several weeks. Steve Dace, Zach Smith, and Eric Scopel and Marty Leap today, and certainly a host of others that I don't recall off the top of my head. But we will continue to track down some of the best guests in college football, so you don't have to listen to me all the time. I know that's just a great thing to do most of the time, but not all the time. So we will continue to track down and bring in some great guests. All right. We see some good people there in the chat. As always, George is here. We've got Wet Blanket, Troy V, Minnie stopping by, and some other good people. Joe Long, Jim, thank you for encouraging everyone to hit the like button. That is much appreciated. And a lot of good NFL conversation in the chat. Matthew Miller, good to see you. And again, good NFL conversation in the chat. It tends me to kind of swing that way and lean that way and want to drive into some NFL conversation. But no, we are the Voice of College Football. It's the College Football Show. It's Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And our work is not done today. We had the Ohio State live show this morning, Ole Miss live this afternoon. Here we are right now. We've got 7 p.m. Eastern with Miami and Cam Underwood from State of the U and myself get together And then Leanne Herring stopping by at 8:30 Eastern for the On the Move show, our recruiting and transfer portal show. So we will take your calls tonight. How does that sound? George and others, of course. And George, behave tonight when you give us a call. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. I have to share this. Trying to think where that comment came in. Oh, I know where, because it was not to any of my channels. Yes, I was on Juck on Bucks, and I went back, and it is quite, for as much as, of course, I check out your comments to the channel here. I know I don't respond to most of them. I don't necessarily apologize for that, but I would like to do so, but it's just not feasible. So anyway, and we certainly entertain and want all of you to converse with each other in the comment section. But it is kind of interesting to go on other people's shows and then check out their comment section, because I figure, okay, these people are not familiar with me. Maybe some of them know who I am and others don't. I am often, and Jim, thank you so much for the super chat. We'll get to that in just a second. So I'm usually floored by apparently how many people know me on these other shows, but their fan base doesn't watch or doesn't appear to be that way. But this one guy made some kind of comment because people responded to the show very favorably, said a lot of nice things about how you got on a really good guess, and or you and Mark, meaning Juck on Bucks, and myself should collaborate more on a regular basis, and all those sorts of things that were very nice to read. But one guy in particular said something like, Mark's one of the first guys I watched on YouTube, very knowledgeable, very this, very that, professional, but he e-begs. Took me a second. E-begs. He e-begs. Oh, I want you to shop on the Amazon link. Got it. Sorry to disturb you on that. We're trying to make a buck here. So the Amazon link, sorry for the e-begging. The Amazon link's in the description section of all the videos. And you can contribute financially here at the Voice of College Football without spending a penny by using the Amazon link. And it doesn't change your shopping experience in any such way. Jim, thanks for being here. We so much appreciate you. Jim R., have you made your preseason top 10 yet, Mark? What I have done before I get to that direct question would be, and this is a good reminder, although I've got no time today with doing 5 shows, but I will get back on it here in the next few days to tighten up our all-time program rankings. So next week is going to be all-time program rankings week here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to run through all the conferences. We're going to lay out all the metrics, all the reasonable metrics, winning percentage, AP poll, top 25 finishes, top 10 finishes, top 5 finishes, national championships, conference championships, major bowl wins, total bowl wins, NFL draft selections, number 1 picks, All-American selections, Heisman winners, award winners at every position, all of it. That's going to be our all-time program rankings week next week. So be ready for that. What I believe I will do is produce a video on every conference, and then we will get together and discuss together as a family. But Jim, when you're talking about the preseason top 10, I have not done that. No. But it sounds like that's a little shove to do so. If I was going to pick it off the top of my head, see, here's the deal with these predictions. It is so easy to do what everyone else does. And so the top 10 in America should be, in some order, Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame. Who am I missing? Michigan's close. Oregon's close. Ole Miss is close. Alabama, there's your 10. I probably missed a couple. Okay. Everyone's going to predict those teams to finish in the top 10. Everybody's going to predict almost the same 7 to 8 teams to finish in the top 10. Then there's going to be 1 or 2 that are going to be different. And those teams, they're going to predict to finish 12th or 13th. So everybody has group think. Everybody thinks the same thing. However, let's remember, I produced a video. Look it up. If I could tell you the title, I would, so that you could search it more easily. But at this time last year, probably more so in August, near the end of the year, near the end of the off season, when the AP had released its top 25 for 2024, what did I do? I went through the last 5 football seasons to show this is the AP top 10 and the AP top 25. This is how many teams they hit on. It's usually about 6 out of 10. And it's usually about anywhere from only like 12 to about 16 out of 25. They usually miss anywhere from 7 to 10 teams in the top 25 and 3 to 4 teams in the top 10. So I can do what everybody else does. And then just the only difference is to make that final prediction on who's going to win the national championship. Or I can try to be a forward thinker and determine, you know what, out of the preseason top 10, about 3 of those teams are not going to finish in the top 10. Will they not only finish in the top 10? Yes, that's what I failed to explain. 3 or 4 of the preseason top 10 teams will not finish ranked. So that's what needs to be determined. And Jim, thank you so much for the contribution. It is much appreciated. And absolutely. And yes, my predictions are actually made before the season and before the games are played. Yes, that's typically how I approach it. You are not void of predictions here at the Voice of College Football. I predict everything. There's going to be conference championship predictions and the standings from top to bottom in every conference, and I predict every game all season. I predict about 25 games per week times 15 or 16. So I predict like 400 football games a year. So plenty of predictions here at the Voice of College Football. How we're going to present those, now that might be a thing. Minnie says, did anyone see the ESPN FPI top 25 with Nebraska at 25? That does get me excited, not gonna lie. Well, Minnie, we don't want you to lie, but you don't want me to tear to shreds the ESPN FPI and how inaccurate it's been in its history. Don't want to do that. I won't do it. I will let you revel in your happiness. Let's talk after week 4. Joe, I agree. I think it's a very competitive national landscape. 1 through 10 are pretty interchangeable at this point. And in the Big Ten, I'm on record on Michigan Podcast as saying that on paper right now, that the Big Ten race is more wide open than I can remember. I give Ohio State and Penn State a slight lean over Michigan, then Oregon, and I think USC is a wild card. Nebraska is a wild card. Iowa's a wild card. Oh boy. Mark didn't say you can't come with your own shower picks. Oh, this was in response to George. Yes, George. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go Irish Nate. Yes, I have dismantled ESPN and the SEC in the past. And we will wrap up today's show because we do appreciate everyone being here. And I've got 2 more shows to do tonight. So you will get sick of me by the end of the night. So why push it? 7 o'clock Eastern is the Miami show. 8:30 Eastern, Leanne Herring joins us for the On the Move show. And we're going to take your calls. How about that? We could get George to call. We could get Minnie to call. We can get Jim to call. We can get everyone. Why not? Open lines tonight. All right, folks. We'll see you at 7 Eastern. Let me try to go find something to eat that is good for me. That's the challenge these days. See you at 7.